From Shonen Jump's Big 3, Naruto, One Piece, and Bleach, I've had the privilege to talk about and calculate feats from 2 of these series. However, if Thanos has taught us anything, it's that the universe demands balance. So, fixing that imbalance is what we're going to do here today. That said, I hope that you have your Zanpakuto handy and are ready to activate your Bankai, as we are going to travel across several worlds in order to calculate the power of Ichigo Kurosaki.
Just shut up and watch.
Hello Internet, Jojo here. Now, a while ago, I promised that when we hit 1,000 subscribers, I would make a video calculating Ichigo Kurosaki's power, and as we hit that goal recently, here we are to do just that. So, that said, I know why you're here, you know why you're here, let's stop wasting time and get to the calculations. As usual, let's start off with calculating Ichigo's offensive power. First up was when Ichigo was fighting Ukiura and he activated his commonly called Vasto Lorde form. Ukiura attacked Vasto Lorde Ichigo with his spear, and instead of dodging it, he grabbed it and tanked the entire thing.
His bare hand.
Ukiura had previously launched an identical attack, but that one missed and landed on the ground, making a massive explosion. Using the wall as a ruler, and this explosion must be about 242 kilometers wide or 121 kilometers in radius. An explosion like this would have to be worth about 1,323 gigatons of TNT. However, we run into a problem. The problem with this is that Vasto Lorde is not his strongest form, so now we have to address his power-ups. First, we need to address the big issue. Ichigo has 4 main parts to his power: Shinigami, Hollow, Quincy, and Fullbringer. However, all these seem to have their own version of the Shinigami's Shikai and Bankai. They're not exactly the same, and their base powers are vastly different, but we can assume that they are comparable to each other in regards to their power multiplier. Now, because they exist in different power sets, we cannot multiply them together. Instead, we must add the full power of one to the full power of the other. Basically, this means that the Hollow Mask did not multiply the power of Ichigo's Bankai by a specific number, instead it added power by a specific number. Let me explain a little better. When Ichigo first fought Renji in the human world, he was actually on par with him in many ways. However, that was when Renji had his limiter on, and this reduced his power by 5 times. When Ichigo fought him again in the spirit world, he was not using his limiter, and Ichigo's Shikai was able to match that power. This means that Ichigo's power was around 5 times greater than his first Shikai. We can also assume that this Bankai was a 5 times increase, as we find out later that his power was being restricted. So, by multiplying the Shikai's 5 times by his Bankai's 5 times, and this comes to be about 25 times stronger than his first Shikai. His other powers likely work in similar ways, so the Hollow Mask likely has the same increase that Shikai does 5 times. But these powers only add to each other. This means that when Ichigo activates his Hollow Mask, he becomes 30 times stronger than his previous Shikai. This works for his other powers as well. Assuming that the Vasto Lorde form is a hollow version of a Bankai, and remember that Ichigo's Shinigami powers were activated as well, and it breaks down like this. This gives us a power multiplier of 50 times greater than Ichigo's first Shikai. Actually, this is the same breakdown that we get for Ichigo's final form, except for the fact that by the end of the series, he was not being restrained. So, to account for that restraining, we can raise the Shikai and Bankai's multiplier of 5 times to 10 times. This means that at the end of the series, Ichigo's Bankai power multipliers break down like this, giving us a multiplier of 200. However, that's not where it ends. In Bleach Brave Souls, there are many different versions of Ichigo having mastered his various powers. From full mastery over his Hollow powers to combining his Shinigami, Hollow, and Fullbringer powers. But we're looking at this version. In 2019, this version of Ichigo was released. This version of him is having mastered all 4 of his lineages, Shinigami, Quincy, and Hollow. While it does not explicitly say that his Fullbring powers are included here, we can assume based on the name, the fact that it says all lineages, and that it has those Fullbring straps, that it does include Fullbring powers. So this means that Ichigo's unrestrained power should break down like this. This gives us a power multiplier of 400 times. Multiplying this power of 1,323 gigatons of TNT by 250, and we get a result of 330 teratons of TNT. this is not even close to his max power, as it barely even poses a threat to him. In fact, he could have probably taken that in his base form. To fully explain what I mean by that, let's rewind a bit to when Ukiwara states that he could destroy Las Noches. Ukiwara says this, but they are outside the city. However, assuming that is true, we can find its implied power. This formula that we're going to use is designed to calculate the energy produced by the pressure wave a yield of a bomb would have. In this formula, R is the radius of the affected area in meters, and P is the pressure in bars. Applying the pressure value for heavy damage, 20 psi, or about 1.37895 bars, we get an energy of about 10.535 teratons of TNT. Now, like before, his Shinigami Shikai and his Hollow Mask give a multiplier of 5 times, but he's also using his Bankai, leaving him at about 30 times stronger. This leads us to needing to multiply his power about 275 times, as Final Form Ichigo has a power-up that looks like this. Multiply the 10 teratons by this, and we get a power of 2,897 teratons of TNT. Yet, Ichigo has shown more power, but to find this, we need to look back at his Vasto Lorde form. In Bleach Brave Souls, Vasto Lorde Ichigo can do this. In this scene, Ichigo speeds through these pillars, lands on one of these pillars, bursts upward into the sky, turns around, and fires what I think is a Grand Ray Zero. Taking these two screenshots of him moving in a time of 0.01 seconds, we find that he moved at about 19,841 miles per hour. Now, Ichigo lands on this pillar and flies up for 1.11 seconds before he turns and blasts. If Ichigo moved at 19,000 miles per hour for 1.11 seconds, he would reach a height of 6.11 miles or 9.845 kilometers. After he fires this, the camera pans out and he seems to be near the middle of the explosion. So, doubling this height for the explosion, and assuming that it's a half sphere, we get a volume of about 15.99 trillion cubic meters. Now, for this calculation, we're going to use the energy value of plasma, 10 billion joules per cubic meter. But that is a bit iffy at best. You see, characters in Bleach use Ryatsu in their attacks, and Ryatsu is spiritual energy. This means that it's not really a physically quantifiable ability. However, just by looking at it, we can tell this is not just a normal explosion. That said, by taking the volume and applying the energy density of plasma, this feat comes to be worth about 38.22 teratons of TNT. Applying the power-ups that we mentioned before, and assuming that this is restrained Vasto Lorde, this comes to yield a power of 9,555 teratons of TNT. This is insanely massive, hundreds of thousands of times stronger than even some of the most powerful ever deployed nuclear bombs, and millions of times stronger than the first ever nuclear bombs. Yet, Ichigo is stronger still. Remember in one of the greatest moments in Bleach, and possibly anime in general, but that's just my opinion, when Ichigo stopped the Sokyoku? This attack was so powerful that it was stated to be able to destroy the capital city, Serieti. This city is circular and stated to take 10 days to go from one of the 4 gates to one of the other 4 gates at least. We can assume that Yoruichi is talking about a brisk jog or somewhere around that. So, assuming that they would be jogging at a brisk pace of 6 miles per hour and not stopping to rest, we find that the entire city's perimeter is 5,760 kilometers. A perimeter like this would give the city an area that is about 375 times the size of Texas. This is far larger than Las Noches' pathetic California-sized dimensions. Using the same formula that we did for Las Noches, the numbers for heavy damage to a city, also like we did for Las Noches, which are 20 psi or 1.378 bars, and the city's radius, we find that Ichigo would need to block the equivalent energy of 61.9 teratons of TNT, and Ichigo is easily able to block this in his Shikai form without his Hollow, Quincy, or Fullbring powers. So if we remove the Shinigami Shikai from the equation, basically it's just removing 5 times, as his power was still being restrained at the time, and we end up with a multiplier of 350 times. Multiplying 61.9 teratons of TNT by 350, and Ichigo must be able to produce about 21,671 teratons of TNT. This could kill every person on the planet several times over, and is over 433 million times more powerful than the Sar Bomba, the most powerful deployed bomb ever. Now, this last feat of incredible power is a feat that Ichigo did not do, but he should scale to this only at his very strongest. This next feat is the single most powerful feat in the entire series. This feat goes far beyond moonbusting, The feat we're looking at is when Kenpachi destroyed this meteor. When fighting one of the strongest Stern Ritter, the letter I for imagination, Kenpachi was forced to go into his Bankai and shatter this meteor into pieces. From this panel, we can compare the meteor to the Serieti, and the Serieti is about 1,833.46 kilometers in diameter. Tracing the outline of the city's protective shield and comparing it to the meteor, and assuming that it's this shape, we find that this meteor is about 567 kilometers wide. That's about 18.3 times larger than Puerto Rico. A meteor this size would weigh about 669 quintillion kilograms. That's about 1.4 million Mount Everests, and it's falling at your typical meteor speeds, if not far faster. Kenpachi launches himself at it. When he reached it, he struck it so hard that the meteor ended up completely shattered. Now, a rock this large would have its own gravitational field, so doing some simple calculations, we can discover that it would require 63 septillion joules or 15.13 petatons of TNT just to overpower its gravity. For Kenpachi to shatter it as well, he would need to generate 50 joules per cubic centimeter, which would yield an energy of 1.1436 petatons of TNT. That gives us the energy to shatter the rock and the energy to overpower its gravitational field. But that's not accounting for the big number, kinetic energy. A meteor moves at speeds from about 25,000 miles per hour to 160,000 miles per hour. If this meteor is moving at the slowest speeds, it should have a kinetic energy of about 10 exatons of TNT. But at its fastest, it would be charged with over 409 exatons of TNT. This is enough to shatter the moon 14 times over. This is obviously an incredible jump for Ichigo, increasing his power by many times over. But it's not out of the question. However, it's more likely than not that Ichigo only scales to this at his very strongest, so we can't realistically or logically multiply this by any more. Before we move on to Ichigo's speed, I feel the need to mention Ichigo killing the Soul King. Some people have taken this to mean that Ichigo could destroy the planet, as the Soul King is described as being the linchpin for the human world, the Soul World, and the Hollow World. However, in good conscience, I cannot give Ichigo that power for several reasons. Now, I am not trying to make anyone mad or start any arguments. If I was, you know it. The first reason is that the Soul King is called the linchpin. That is a very specific word, and by definition, the linchpin does not support any fraction of the weight of what is being held up. Let me give an example. Remember that scene in Captain America when he takes on the flag? Well, he walks over to it, takes a small pin out, takes a larger pin out, and the flag falls. The linchpin is the small one. Its only job is to keep the larger pin in place. No one in their right mind would look at this and say that pre-serum Steve Rogers is flagpole level, as he just took the flag down the way it's supposed to come down. This applies to the Soul King as well. His very being was there to regulate and balance the flow of souls, as that balance is what holds the world together. The plate spinning on a stick is a great example, and one that Bleach uses multiple times. The Soul King was the guy who kept it in balance. With the Soul King gone, this guy, I am not going to try to pronounce his name.
What? This sexy mustachioed man right here, Yuha.
The katakana ends with a sharp ka sound, so you walk?
You-ha-vah. You-ha-vah.
I get it.
All
You-ha-vah.
had to do was to remove the larger pin, or in this case, disrupt the flow of souls and let the world fall. And this isn't the only evidence. While I have not read the novel myself, from what I gathered early in his life, the Soul King killed so many hollows that the world became unstable. This means the world was stable before he became the linchpin, because he was the one who destabilized it in the first place. He is holding the world together by acting as a linchpin from the consequences of his own actions. He also got his arms ripped off, organs ripped out, and left in a state between life and death, so anyone could easily kill him. That's why the Zero Squad exists. They are the strongest of the strongest because they need to be to protect the fragile Soul King. Also, you know how Aizen was like, oh, he's a dimension above me and all that? Well, if Ichigo really was a dimension above Aizen, there's no way that Aizen could have hurt him. Yet, Aizen did, and we know that by looking at his clothes, it was extensive damage. The dimension difference is best linked to an artist and their drawing. With a swipe of the hand, the artist's character is no more. But Ichigo had used all his power to beat Aizen, and he did not even end up killing him. Hey guys, Future JoJo here, and I just wanted to say that I had several more minutes of explaining why Ichigo and other characters are not capable of planet destruction. But, as I was editing the video, I came across a feat that I missed. I am talking about Yu Havok lifting a city to the Soul Palace. Now, depending on what the results end up being, it could be around planetary level destruction, or it could be far lower, as I have seen several calculations online that have this thing's power all over the place. So while giving Ichigo planet-destroying power because he killed the Soul King is silly, as I've explained, scaling him to Yu Havok lifting up the city would not be unreasonable. Also, if this feat is high enough, then it might justify scaling Ichigo to Kenpachi's Bankai. So, just know that I am aware of this feat, and I will try to calculate it at some point in the future. Though, that could be any time in the future.
I'm so changeable. It is a weakness with me, but to be fair to myself, it is my only weakness.
Typically, I just kind of do what I want when I want to do it. I don't really have a schedule, I just do things. That said, if you are interested in knowing the power of that feat, then make sure that you subscribe and hit that like button. Now, I will say that you probably shouldn't get your hopes up for planet-destroying power, but we'll just have to see. That said, let's talk about Ichigo's speed. Ichigo has many good feats of speed, able to move so fast that he forms speed clones, easily move faster than I can see, can move too fast for stun raiders who can dodge light to see, and can move in front of Orihime who can react to light faster than she can see. However, his first Bankai is explicitly stated to be able to move as fast as lightning. As you might know, lightning has two speeds. The slower 220,000 mph leader, which is what characters like Kaminari, Sasuke, and Loxus tend to use, and a faster 220 million mph lightning return stroke, which is much harder to justify giving it to a character. More often than not, you have to justify giving this to a character based off their strength compared to other characters and the power tier of the characters in the story. However, for this calculation, we will use both speeds, because both seem to be applicable in varying scenarios. Starting with the slower 220,000 mph speeds, we just need to add a multiplier of 325 as we are starting from Ichigo's Shinigami form. Multiplying these together, and we find that Ichigo must be able to move at 71.5 million miles per hour, or Mach 93,187. This is about 10% the speed of light, but is just his slowest. If we instead multiply 325 by the faster speeds for the return stroke, and Ichigo maxes out at about 106 times the speed of light. Impressive, most impressive, but it's not his fastest. Next up is when he moved too fast for Orihime to see. During the 1000-year Blood War arc, when Ichigo comes across Ichida, Ichida fires what he calls Lixragon, or Rain of Light, and Orihime is able to react fast enough to use her shield to block it. Taking Ichida's height and comparing him to this section of the tower, then that section of the tower to when Ichigo is in view, and we find that they are about 34.88 meters apart. For Orihime to react before the light hit Ichigo, she must have reacted in about 116 nanoseconds. From this panel, we find that Ichigo and Orihime are about 18 meters apart, but Ichigo had to have moved around her shield to get there. So assuming that his path was like an arc, and he would end up needing to move about 28.355 meters. For him to cover that distance in 116 nanoseconds, he would need to be moving at about 545 million miles per hour, or 81% the speed of light. However, this is when Ichigo is in his merged hollow Shikai. So this means that we need to apply the speed by about 220 to get a final speed of 178 times the speed of light. However, earlier in the arc, he was able to react to a point-blank attack from the Stern Rider who uses lightning that is faster than natural lightning. While this is difficult to comprehend, we can assume that when they say natural lightning, they are referring to the downward stroke that moves at about 220,000 miles per hour. However, the fact that it says faster than natural lightning means that we only have one speed left, the 220 million mile per hour return stroke. Taking Ichigo's face in this panel, and we find that he's about 16.3 centimeters away from the nearest attack, assuming that it is moving at about 220 million miles per hour, and he would have needed to react at about 1.6299 nanoseconds. Assuming that Ichigo raised his arm and shoulder in that time to block the attack, he must be able to move at about 881 million miles per hour, or 1.341 times the speed of light. Scaling this up, and he should be able to move at about 273 billion miles per hour, or 407 times the speed of light. There are possibly more feats that he has done, but they are inconsistent and iffy at best. When he supposedly moved faster than Stern Riders could see, being one of these. In this feat, we don't know where he was moving from or his pathing, so it makes the result practically impossible to justify. Also, I didn't bother talking about his durability, as Ryatsu tends to work the same as offense and defense, meaning that his max output should be his max durability as well. Now, as always, I'm sure that a lot of you don't like how I stacked his powers, but you guys are free to take my numbers and do what you want with them. So, there you go, just like I promised. 1,000 subscribers special. Guys, thank you so much. I am not one of those people who's like, oh, I never thought I'd make it here, and all that stuff. That's just not me. My goal has always been, well, 1 million. But I am glad that I made it here with you guys. We've been through a lot together, and I'm just so thankful to you guys that the channel has continued to grow and grow much faster than I ever expected. So here's the 10,000, 100,000, and after that, 1 million. See you next time. Thanks for watching. Remember to stay spectacular. Jojo, out.